All right, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So I will do this whole spiel again. Apologies, some tech difficulties on my end. I think I was speaking on mute, but welcome everyone to the age-friendly Civic Coffee Hour. We do this work in partnership with the Seattle Public Library, and today we're also doing it in partnership with the Lake City Community Center. And this is not the first time that Lake City has been involved in Civic Coffee. So Lake City's very own Akira joined us a few months ago to talk about art and aging. So if you missed that, check it out. It's on our website and on YouTube. Big thanks to the Lake City team, Kate and all her folks who helped to coordinate this and make it happen. So once again, we are doing this event in a hybrid fashion. So we've got many folks in the room with us having real coffee and real food. And we are also translating this into 3 different languages in addition to English as we speak. So we're going to remind ourselves to speak slowly, take pauses, but I do invite folks in the room as well as the interpreters to remind us if we're going too fast. We want to make sure this information is accessible to everyone, whether you're speaking English, Mandarin, Cantonese, or Spanish today. So with that, I think I'll get us going. And please forgive me in advance because I am having some computer issues today. So I'm sure we can all relate at this point. So before we move much further, I do want to start us off with a land acknowledgement, which is something the city of Seattle often does before meetings internally and externally. We want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present. And we really want to honor with gratitude both the land itself as well as the Duwamish tribe for their stewardship. If you haven't already visited www.duwamishtribe.org, definitely encourage you to do so. You can also check out Real Rent Duwamish to learn more about how you can get involved and take action to support the first people here. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists shortly. They are joining us from AARP as well as the Washington State Treasurer's Office. Sorry, my screens are going blank. So I just want to offer a little bit of a primer here. We're going to be talking about financial planning and fraud prevention today. This is our second conversation on this topic, and so we are back by popular demand. This is a growing challenge that people of all ages are facing, and older adults, as we learned from our first conversation, do have some unique vulnerabilities that can make them susceptible to fraud and scams. And so it's a great opportunity today to learn about how you can protect yourself, how you can spot scams and not fall victim to them, and how you can have these conversations with your family members and friends. So with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to my colleague in the room, Emily Billow, who is with the Seattle Public Library. So she's going to appear on the Zoom screen shortly, but she is physically here with folks in the room. And Emily, I'll hand it to you to talk about the library. Take it away.
Awesome. I believe you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't, can't see me. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Billow. I'm the Older Adult Program Manager for the Seattle Public Library System. But you guys, most of you know me through my work here at Lake City Seniors. We have a few exciting things happening at the library right now. So we have some information on tax help for 2023. So our branches of the library can help you file your taxes. And all the hours that we're doing that is on the back table. We can get you those. I also wanted to introduce our adult service librarian for the Lake City branch. Her name is Josie. And it's always great to see a familiar face when you go to your branch. And she's at Lake City branch most of the time. So feel free to ask for her if you would like. And thank you all for being here. Such a great partnership with Age Friendly, and we're excited for the program. So let's get going.
Thanks, Emily, and welcome, Josie. Thanks for being here today. Can't believe it's tax season already. Glad to know there's help available. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first guest today. Kay Tomlinson has been with the Fraud Watch Network as a volunteer with the AARP since she retired from a successful business providing financial management for major companies. And we are super lucky to have her. Kate also does AARP's Broad Watch Fridays. So if you are interested in this topic and you want to keep learning more, please tune in to that live broadcast each month. She really brings her passion and experience on these issues to making sure that people stay safe even as the world evolves online, and we're all learning how to keep ourselves safe from fraudsters and cyber criminals. So thank you, Kay, for being here. And next, I want to introduce John McKenney, who is the Financial Education Coordinator for the Office of the Washington State Treasurer. So we often in these civic coffees bring together community leaders as well as government employees and public sector professionals. And so this is a great example of these two coming together to help educate us. John works to actually promote financial education in K through 12 public school systems through partnerships with nonprofit organizations named FEPPP, which is Financial Education Public-Private Partnership, right?
That's correct.
Great. So this really takes all kinds of partners to make sure that we are understanding the risks out there and able to communicate and educate folks. And again, John also brings his personal passion for teaching and educating to this role as well. So we're lucky to have him today as well.
Thank you.
So thank you both for being here. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have more of a conversation together. So just bear with me while I find that button. Well, okay. I think I have successfully managed to stop sharing, but please let me know if folks can see my calendar. So I am going to ask, I'm going to ask John if you can kick us off by just walking us through some of the typical financial issues facing people as they age. So why is financial literacy so important to older adults?
You bet. I think that, so when it comes to some of the financial issues that we face as we grow older, it really kind of comes down to two main things, where the first part really is a kind of a conglomerate, a grouping of a bunch of things that come together to make it up. So the first one would be not having enough income or not having enough savings. And so that can be related to things such as rising healthcare costs, still having debt as we enter into our golden years. So maybe having credit card debt or mortgage payments, or feeling obligated to help other family members as well. And then lastly as well, I think the fact of longevity. I think that many of us are living longer than we kind of anticipated or maybe planned for. And so all of those things really kind of fall into that first topic of, not having enough income or not having enough savings for the long run. The other second part I would say is kind of, it's more or less related to challenges that are out of our control. And so this could be related to current events as well as things that may have happened to us in the past or happened to everyone really in the past. Some of the economic unpredictability. So like, for example, 9/11, the dot-com bubble burst around 2000, or the real estate bubble burst, and then the financial crisis we faced in 2006 to 2008. And then as of late, as we've all been through, we've been dealing with this global pandemic. A lot of these things affect our pocketbooks as well as so many other aspects of our life. And so we are also now hearing, and although I don't want to speculate on anything, but we are hearing about things with regards to inflation. We're feeling that as well. The cost of everything is rising with everything that we're dealing with. And so, these are some of the things that face us. And I guess that what some of the things that I want to point out as far as ways to deal with this is to kind of remind us that, or remind you all that you've worked very hard for your retirement. So whether it's these events that are out of our control, or if there's something that's in our control and we can do something about them, don't let anyone take that away from you. Start with the things that we know how to do. So we've each dealt with a lot with regards to how we've gotten to where we are now, but the basics really remain the same. So finding ways to make our money go further. And so if that means revisiting our budget, that's great, or planning in advance for upcoming known purchases. Maybe they're large purposes or purchases, or maybe they're just gifts that we have or celebrations of life. Planning in advance and sticking to that plan. Cutting back on costs. So reviewing our needs versus our wants. I think that it's very underestimated sometimes how important that can be. And I think that it's something that I don't have to remind you of. I'm sure that reviewing needs versus wants is something that you're familiar with, but having those conversations with other loved ones is also very important, and it can bring the perspective together for everyone when we do this. And so, making wise choices when you regularly shop around for bargains, or clipping coupons, or locating things that are free or on discounted prices, I think is also important. And then taking advantage of tools and tips to save on taxes as tax season's coming around, or other discounts that other organizations provide for us, whether it's senior discounts or military discounts. Shopping high and low, how literally at the grocery store, the stuff that's at eye level is the most expensive. And then the stuff that's below, where we have to bend down and pick them up, those can tend to be sometimes the less expensive items. Or going to a dollar store and finding, kitchen products or plastic containers or dishcloths that we can get from there to basically reduce the costs that we have. And then lastly, or as a part of that as well, I want to point out is there's always the opportunity for us to find new tools. So whether you prefer to be kind of self-guided on that, or if you want help, I think that a refresher course on budgeting and debt and credit and payoff plans and things like that can be actually quite helpful. And so along with multiple other offices that are a part of government agencies, our office as well, we provide regular online courses. And then as well, we also provide these what are called modules on our website, where you can pick a topic and you go through them, and then it kind of refreshes your memory on these things. So I think that if we can seek help when we need it, and speak up and report things and ask questions. Sometimes we are our only advocate, and we have the right not only to stand up for ourselves, but we deserve to. And it can be okay with asking for help with our finances. So perhaps we feel like we should talk with a financial counselor or an advisor from the banks or credit unions that we may go to. There's also, for example, an organization called the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, which provides nonprofit organizations that are accredited by this organization that help with this kind of counseling. But ultimately, when it comes to these things, we really want to avoid going into further debt. So there's many times where you hear advertisements about things or plugs for borrowing more money. Taking out new sources of borrowed money can be extremely risky. So I just strongly recommend that if that is something you are even considering, to speak with a financial professional about that, and then otherwise find ways that we can do so with just cutting back on our costs.
Thank you. So before I pivot to Kay, you mentioned just the importance of being aware of various discounts that are available. So I'll just do a quick plug for 2 discounts that I know of that folks might be able to benefit from. One is making sure that you have, if you are age 60 and above, making sure you have a gold card, which is totally free. We can give them to you from the city of Seattle. And there's a whole bunch of different vendors, restaurants, entertainment establishments that have voluntarily joined this discount directory to offer discounts to older adults, as well as anybody 18 and older with a disability. So that's great to be aware of. Some things are totally free, like a visit to the aquarium. Other things might be a percentage off your purchase. So check that out. And the other thing to remind folks of who are in Seattle is the utilities discount program. And so that can be a great way to save as well on your monthly utilities bill. So don't worry if you are frantically writing all of these resources down. We will make sure we compile them and share them with folks who are on the call and who are in the room afterwards, folks in the room, you should already, there's a handout with many of these resources already on them. So feel free to grab that before you leave as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kay. So John mentioned family members and some feeling obligated to support family members or having family responsibilities. And there are, unfortunately, many times we know that oftentimes financial abuse happens from a family member, by a family member. And so how can someone differentiate personal will with people influencing and taking advantage of an older adult? Those things can be really hard to parse out, whether you're on the outside or whether you are the person potentially being taken advantage of.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is a really hard topic to talk about and to anticipate, because nobody wants to think that a caregiver or especially a family member would take advantage, even steal, or maybe willfully mislead. But you're right, sometimes it can be hard to tell, is this the person's will or are they being taken advantage of? Because many times we know that folks that are being taken advantage of or exploited are willing participants, or they're hiding what's going on because they don't want anyone to know. And, you know, so I guess the question is, if you suspect that there's a problem, whether your loved one is thrilled about what's happening or not, but you've kind of got that voice in the back of your head that's telling you something's not quite right, what can you do? And I think that's the question that sometimes we get stuck on. Well, you know, if you can, and it depends on the circumstance, sit down and have a conversation with your loved one to just kind of be patient, understanding, non-judgmental, and to kind of find out, ask them, hey, I noticed this. What can you tell me about that? Because again, especially seniors don't want to acknowledge being taken advantage of because they're embarrassed. Or, you know, sometimes they just really don't believe there's a problem. So if you have an opportunity to sit down, point out red flags, gently ask what's going on, if they'll allow it, take a look at some financial statements, or discuss with an attorney, even if you need to go on your own to see an attorney that specializes in elder law. Not a bad idea. Some schools of thought say or suggest that if you suspect a family member is being abusive or taking advantage, especially financially, to take your concerns to that person and say, have you noticed this? You know, what about this? You know, this is happening. This mom's bank account seems to be having trouble. And again, some schools of thought suggest doing that, asking probing questions in a non-threatening way, just so that other people in the family are aware that someone is concerned something's happening. Share your concerns. And of course, if you discover things like mail fraud, credit card abuse, or just plain theft, then those are things that need to be escalated, if not to an area agency on aging, to the police, to an attorney, or to a call for the elder abuse hotline. You know, the main thing is if your loved one isn't impaired mentally, and even if what you suspect is true, you still might not be able to help resolve the situation, which is frustrating for the whole family. And I can tell you from experience, my family has personally been through this and saw a family member go through their entire life savings. But all adults have the right to make what others would consider foolish decisions. You know, even if it's reported to the police, if your loved one refuses to press charges or think that there's a problem, it's difficult. And then you need to get additional assistance, again, potentially from an attorney that specializes in elder law, because every situation is different. You really can't pigeonhole, but if you suspect a problem, you can talk to your loved one if they are online, because I think some folks have the idea that seniors, maybe aren't that sophisticated on the internet. I think many people would be very surprised at how many seniors are online, either very sophisticated or they know enough to get onto Facebook and email, and away they go. So talking to your loved one about what they're doing online, it's not always a family member that is taking fraudulent action against your loved one. Again, once you suspect a problem, you need to really start investigating the warning signs, and if possible, start with a conversation with your loved one.
Thanks, Kay. And I want to come back to get your thoughts on how people can protect themselves in the cyberspace. But first, I'm wondering if you can provide us with a couple concrete examples of potential red flags or scenarios in which an older adult might find themselves and they're wondering, am I being taken advantage of?
Sure, absolutely. And, the warning signs, I think that, if it's a loved one and we're not sure they're being taken advantage of, if the things you would think I don't want to say obvious, because again, each situation is different, missing property, missing checks, changes in wills or trusts, sudden escalation of gifts to outsiders or family members or friends, being encouraged to sign property over. But, the signs of red flags, I guess you could say, in terms of abuse, the most common scams are imposter scams and identity theft. So what are the red flags? For imposter scams, you get calls, text, emails from a government agency or a utility or a company saying that there's a problem, and red flag, you have to act right away. This is an urgent matter. No, you can't go talk to a family member or a friend. You have to pay right now, and it has to be by a gift card, wire transfer. You get an email that's promising something wonderful, and it has spelling errors and bad grammar. And again, it wants to give you something, or it's asking you to click here and provide personal information. For identity theft, accounts are emptied, new accounts created. So all of a sudden you're receiving notices of past due bills that you don't even know that you had a debt. Collection notices, welcome letters from companies thanking you for opening new accounts. You know that someone has your personal information. So again, whether you're experiencing these, either you're getting phone calls, you're getting texts, you're getting emails, or you see that something is happening to your loved one that loves to keep in touch with grandkids on Facebook. And now all of a sudden their bank account is really dwindling, and they have a new friend that they're talking to all the time on Facebook, and they're just so close, and it's like their soulmate, and this goes back to the idea of, do I think I'm being scammed, or am I a willing participant? We had one senior lady tell us that when the person that was scamming her was caught and arrested by the police, her comment was not to be concerned about all the money she'd lost. She really missed those phone calls every day, talking to him, because he was so nice and they just spent so much time visiting. She really missed that. So again, things to watch out for, whether it's for yourself, or all of a sudden these things are starting to happen with your loved one and you're getting suspicious.
Thank you. So I'm going to summarize. I think I heard you say, watch out for emails or phone calls or texts that might sound too good to be true. Like, you want a cruise. I know.
Sweepstakes.
My wife was very excited recently about her potential cruise winnings, but that was a scam. Or if it demands something from you urgently, and it doesn't give you time to think or talk to trusted friends and family, or if it wants you to click on something and provide personal information, and it's not something you were expecting to receive.
Correct.
So keep an eye out for those things. That's helpful to keep in mind. So John, I'm going to pass it back to you. You know, people can be fearful when it comes to talking about personal finances, because they may have in the past been met with judgment or criticism. You talked about kind of coming at this conversation from a place of empowerment. People have lived long lives and been capable of managing their finances for decades. So what are some ways that older adults can kind of really reclaim their power and make informed financial decisions?
Definitely. So, yeah, and I think it's interesting with regards to the fearfulness that we're seemingly being a bit of a theme here, as far as the fear of reporting or fear of admitting that, you know, something like a scam happened to you, the fear of judgment and criticism, and there's a lot of that kind of goes on with this. And it's interesting because I saw a recent article in a financial newsletter that was discussing basically like hot topics and current issues and how they're difficult to talk with, specifically with family members. And they listed like 5 of them. I think it was like religion, health, politics, death, and then personal finances. And the hardest topic that people placed as at the top of the list was personal finance. I think it was like almost 50% of them had basically said that they'd rather talk about, for example, death than personal finances. And so, and this is amongst family members. So for us to bring up this topic to people who work in the financial world or who deal with these, you know, helping individuals with scams and essentially going there and saying, you know, this happened to me, that can be even harder. And so I certainly get that. And I think that, like you had mentioned, that idea of empowerment is so important here with regards to this, because looking back at the experiences that we've had, having gone through the good and the bad, the good experiences that we learned about money and the bad experiences that we've had, I think can really help to empower us, and bringing back and refreshing that knowledge in our head is super important. So I don't think I need to really remind folks of this, but you know, life is short and tomorrow's no guarantee. We want to be vigilant and actively make today what we want it to be, and to do what we can to make, you know, as many great tomorrows as possible. And like I said, you've worked for your retirement very hard, and you deserve it. And so again, don't let anyone take that away from you. So please, I understand that it's there, but I guess I'm almost pleading to say, don't feel ashamed. Please seek the help that you need to, and report the crimes to proper places. And you don't necessarily have to tell your family members too, if that's something that you have a hard time doing. You know, filing a police report or filing a report with the Federal Trade Commission, or a local organization that I work with is the Department of Financial Institutions, is another place that you can also file reports with. And when you do this, and when you let the other financial organizations that you work with know that this happened, it kind of sets up a red flag around you, where, and what I mean by that is a good one in regards to that people are watching out for you in that regards. You have maybe your credit card companies or your utility companies knowing that this happened, and then being aware that they should be watching for this in relation to you and your accounts. And then as well, it can help your friends who might be later on down the road experiencing maybe the same scam. And if you have been met with judgment or criticism, especially when you've sought out help, especially, I'm so sorry for that. And no one should feel that kind of judgment, especially when we're going and seeking out that help. And so for someone who works in the financial education world, and someone who gets to work hand in hand with others who are in other financial institutions, and who essentially kind of advocate for folks who may have been historically marginalized or discriminated against as well, whether it's based on race or ethnicity or disability or age, many other factors. We will frequently, get together and essentially talk about the times where we ourselves have also experienced financial fraud and financial scams and things like that. And so I hope that we can see it's important to work to address these problems, but I understand that the main reason folks are afraid of saying something is maybe because they are afraid of the judgment of being thought of essentially kind of being being incompetent, maybe to care for themselves. And this is a judgment that specifically can be related to age. And I think that being a victim of this fraud is so commonplace now, where when I would start with my workshops, when I first started in this position, I used to ask the question, do you know someone who's been a victim of identity theft? Well, I mean, inevitably everyone raised their hands. And so I had to switch the question around and say, do you know someone who has not been a victim of identity theft? And, inevitably, no one was really raising their hands at that point. And so, like I said, my colleagues and I will get together and talk about this as well. We'll discuss how each of us sharing our stories of how we've been victims. So let me say emphatically that becoming a victim of a scam or identity theft has very little to do with someone's mental capacity, and it can happen to anyone, regardless of age, regardless of anything else. And it has nothing to do with being quote unquote too trusting or stupid or an easy mark. It's about scammers knowing what buttons to push, because essentially these criminals have actually studied the psychology behind how people are willing to part with their money, which was something that was actually a study that was put on by DFI and I think AARP. But essentially what they did was they asked questions of these individuals who were in the prison system and had revised their lives and sort of turned things around. And they specifically would study the psychology of elderly folks who are retired and are sitting on money. And that's their job, and they're good at that. And so I think that just keeping that in mind and realizing that there are so many of us who are in this boat together, and to not be ashamed of that, and to hopefully, if you can, work past that judgment and criticism, I think is super, super important.
And, John, if I could just jump in and just totally agree with everything that you've just said. And that is a major focus of AARP across the country, is to try to convince people to move away from the idea of anyone that's scammed has been a victim, and how could you be so stupid? That common thought that many people have. And I can tell you that these scammers are sophisticated, they are well trained. It doesn't matter if you are highly educated or have no education. They are after your money and your personal information. And the idea of blaming the victim is not correct. Anybody can be taken advantage of. The fraudsters call it getting their victim under the ether, and it's creating a heightened emotional state in your victim to where you have so much trouble thinking rationally because you're thinking emotionally, and they are sophisticated and expert at doing that. So I so appreciate, John, what you and the groups that you're working with are doing to that end, to educate people, because it is so important.
Yeah, thank you both for reminding us of that. I'm currently scheduled for a mandatory anti-phishing training with our IT department because I fell for a phishing scam that was a test. I got so excited about a potential free gym membership that I clicked on a link that my better judgment warned me against. So it can happen to all of us at all ages,
Yes.
especially when we're in that emotional state, good or bad. Kay, speaking of the digital world and things we should and should not click on, can you talk to us a bit about password protection and why password security is so important when we're online? And
Sure.
before you answer, I do want to remind folks in the room that there are, I think, small pieces of paper, maybe at the tables, maybe passed around, and you are welcome to write your question on that paper, and someone will route that to me and I can ask our panelists. So if you have a burning question, anything at all, feel free to jot it down and ask our panelists.
Mhm.
And Kay, I'll now hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. I mentioned earlier that sometimes contrary to popular belief, very many seniors are quite active online, sometimes quite an expertise, sometimes just because they like to check email and read the news. Fantastic. It's a great way to stay connected. But I always tell people that when I talk about password management, I can see them roll their eyes, whether in person or on the screen, because believe me, it's nobody's favorite topic, and it doesn't matter whether you're young or old. Nobody likes to deal with passwords, but it is extremely important because the truth is that password management is the most effective way. It's step one in a multi-layered approach, step one of preventing fraud when someone is doing any activity online. Just some really super basic tips. Strong passwords, long passwords. Think of a phrase, and instead of using any English or foreign words in another language that are real words, think of a phrase that has meaning to you and use the first letter of each word rather. Throw in some symbols and some numbers, and you've got a good password. But then, of course, the tough thing is scammers know that we're essentially lazy and roll our eyes when we talk about passwords. So they know that we like to use passwords across many accounts. If they break into one account, they have systematic algorithms on their computers to try it on all financial accounts to see if you've used it somewhere else. So don't use the same password across accounts. Don't share your passwords with others. Don't write them down or put them on little sticky notes, on your monitor. And then enable what's called two-factor authentication. And many of us probably do this already if we do online banking or go into Social Security online to check our account. And that is where an institution, a company is going to, after you enter your ID and password, send you either a code that you can then enter online to prove it's you, or ask you a series of secret questions that you've set up in advance. You have to be careful with secret questions. Again, not sharing information online on social media that now you're using as answers to your secret questions, because in many instances, we are targeted in terms of being targeted for higher risk by scammers. Turn on automatic software updates on your device, whether it's a mobile device, desktop, laptop, so you have the most recent security, and especially consider using a password manager program. There are free versions, there are low-cost versions, there's higher cost versions, depending on what you want to do. These programs are going to manage all of your eye-rolling passwords for you, so you don't have to try to remember dozens and dozens. The key is you need a strong master password that is brand new You've never used it before anywhere because you don't know if there's been a data breach somewhere else that you're not aware of, and that password is compromised and just not used yet. Brand new master password, very secure, very extreme, long, all those things that we just talked about, and don't share it anywhere else or with anyone else. But again, password manager is a great way to help protect you, and passwords are the entryway into your digital life for a scammer.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it is like a doorway to just
It's like a doorway.
hack your password. So John, I'm gonna hand it back to you and ask, so you mentioned that there are different issues that might come up as someone is aging, for instance, rising costs of healthcare, and people living on fixed incomes after retirement. So what are some banking and other money management tips that older adults can consider for their retirement years? One thing you mentioned earlier was talking to a financial advisor. And is this something that anyone can do? Like, let's say I have a bank account at Bank of America. Can I just go in and say, I'd like to talk to someone to help me map out my next 20 years?
Right, that's a great question. So when it comes to the financial institutions that we have, specifically as well, since my understanding is around our state, so I'll be talking mostly around Washington state, but what I'm finding is that the financial institutions are really pushing more and more to have or provide these services. So having a financial counselor there or a financial advisor who is readily available to folks who want to come in and essentially, ask a simple question, or maybe even sit down and talk to them about some of their specific budgeting problems or debt problems. Additionally, not just in the financial institutions, there are a number of nonprofit financial counseling services that are free to the public. Again, if you check out that website, it's nfcc.org. That's the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. When you go there, you can locate places that are near you that also provide these free counseling services. And so, I think by all means, I would highly recommend that as an option, should you have questions and having that opportunity to sit down with somebody and really dive into someone's finances to figure out ways to cut down on costs and save our money a little bit better. Those one-on-one conversations can really prove to be very, very, very positive and very much of a good scenario for us when we're trying to save money. And I think that seeking that out is definitely something that we can do. And then additionally, as far as like banking tips or money saving tips, again, I think it goes back to, making our money go further for what we already have. And so I already mentioned the idea, which is something that I'm sure most of us are already familiar with, but that discipline of managing our money properly. But if we are spending our money unwisely, we can, go back to the table and write down our goals. I actually believe that writing down goals puts those at the forefront of our mind more than just thinking about them. Thinking, next month I'll just be better about my spending. Well, if you write them down, you really put them at the forefront of your mind. And so you can also find ways to basically, cut back on fees in other places where you might be nickel and dime. So whether it's services that you're being regularly charged for that you're no longer needing, maybe it's an investment account or a bank or credit union account that you're looking at, and you can find one that has a low cost, low transaction fee kind of a plan that provides for that. If you are still receiving like a regular source of income, you can choose to automatically have a chunk taken aside and put directly into a savings account where you don't even see it, and it just automatically goes in there. I mentioned this already, but reviewing your needs versus wants. You all have a really good idea, I'm sure, of how to define these. We just kind of need to remember them sometimes. Looking back at those good and bad times in our lives where we've experienced having to do this, I think it's still something that we can essentially help look back on and help with our budget. And then also I want to kind of point out like the idea of modifying our habits. So say we would like to go out to eat. You know, maybe you do the early bird time or go for the happy hour or split a meal or order an appetizer or essentially look for something based on the price and finding ways where you can cut that in half essentially. And so I think that as well, I mentioned this too, as far as planning in advance for purchases that you may have coming up that are large, gift purchases, and then sticking to that plan. And then as well, when it comes to credit, one thing that comes to mind is I have a friend actually who did this, and he had just retired, and essentially he decided to cut up his credit cards. He paid off all his debt, and he just paid in cash. And so I think she knows what's happening. 6 months later, his car insurance rates went through the roof. And so he thought, oh, shoot, well, now I need to go back and establish my credit. So then he went and applied for multiple new lines of credit, which then tanked it even further because he opened up all these new accounts. And so the idea or the thing I'm trying to stress here is keep using credit and keep it in good standing, especially if you have that at this point in time. You want to maintain that going forward. That will help with just maintaining that status quo and not falling victim to that idea where, you know, our car insurance is essentially priced based upon our credit scores. And then as well, the idea of in case of emergency kind of goals. No one likes to talk about these things, but accidents happened. And so we may be living independently now and can function on our own, but you know, something bad might happen, and then all of a sudden we're unable to do something for ourselves. So this was mentioned before by Kay, as far as, you know, telling folks to get someone you trust to be on your accounts. And if you don't trust your kids, then get an attorney or a family member or a close friend, someone who can handle things the way that you want them to be handled in case you are incapacitated or in case you do pass away. These are sobering conversations. They're not enjoyable to have, but I think it's real to do this. And if we don't prepare, we are then essentially leaving chaos for those behind us. And so there's a website that I'm going to provide as well, I think afterwards. It's called, it's essentially a website that helps you to kind of get your stuff together. And it's essentially a website that can help with kind of making those step-by-step plans to sort of get that going. So if you have a will, it might need to be updated. Most folks, I think, kind of forget about that, and it can certainly cause problems that might come down the road later for us. And so, you know, these are difficult conversations to have, but I think being honest about them is important. And we don't want to leave saying the shoulda, wouldas, or couldas on the table. I should have done this. I did that. So whether that means getting our finances in order, or, you know, even taking a trip or taking a dance lesson or whatever it is that interests you, being on top of your finances is something that fits in this category too. And so I think that if we can take these steps to sort of get ourselves set up and have things in place before, you know, something unspeakable does happen, we have them set in place.
Do you think it's a good strategy to closely review your bank statements once a month or, you know, periodically, to make sure that you're not, you mentioned those fees that, you know, maybe we signed up for Disney Plus 2 years ago and forgot to cancel that. So making sure you catch those things that can really add up, and B, making sure that those charges are indeed your charges and someone isn't using your information. What kind of, I guess, cadence would you recommend people review those statements on?
Right. I think honestly, I think anytime you're getting your statements, or essentially as well, I often say this with regards to when if you're in the workforce and you're being paid, to basically revisit your financial situation, your budget on that regular basis. So if you're paid bi-monthly or once a month or whatever, that's probably a good amount. And absolutely, I think you'd be surprised not only that you'll find in your bank statements those things that, oh my gosh, I'm still paying for this. Oh, I better go get rid of that. I better cancel that out. You'll also find that mistakes happen in some of the transactions that occur. And so whether it's a decimal point that's moved over or whatever, I think you have that that information in front of you, and it's something that you can review. And I think that if you do that on a regular basis, you might be surprised at what you'll find.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And another to your point, John, besides reviewing your statements that come on a regular basis, we highly encourage folks, even if you don't participate in online banking, such as paying your bills online, we really recommend going online and setting up an online account to your financial institutions, to your bank, any investment accounts, Social Security, Medicare. And why would you take the time to do that if you're not going to do online banking? If your identity is stolen, any of your personal information is stolen, a fraudster can go online and set up online access to your accounts as you. And then if you want to do that, you can't, because someone posing as you already has, and most likely has already started working through some of your financials to move it over to their accounts. So again, even if you're not into online banking in any capacity, it's worth taking the time to go in and set up those accounts with your ID and, of course, I'll say it again, a very strong password and two-factor authentication.
Thank you for that. Okay, I didn't know that. So I'm going to deviate from our planned questions and lift up something that is in the chat from one of our online participants who's asking, for someone who is incapacitated, doesn't one need some official permission, like power of attorney or some other official document to act on their behalf? I think is what this question is asking. And so maybe you could answer that in twofold. So one, what might that look like in that scenario? But two, what can people do in advance to prepare for such a scenario?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I can speak to in advance, and yes, power of attorney, very important. My husband and I actually years ago, when we did our wills, we already have power of attorney set up for each other. If he's incapacitated or, God forbid, killed in a car wreck, we own our house together. So I can make decisions even if on his behalf, because we already have those documents. But, if someone is incapacitated, or you want to try to prepare, so to speak, what John had spoken of earlier in terms of advanced financial planning is probably step one in my mind, which includes power of attorney. But again, it's really hard to have those conversations before someone is incapacitated. We've even had folks say that they go to their parents and say, Mom, Dad, we're working on our financial planning because we don't want our kids to have to take care of it if something happens to us. Have you done this yet? What advice can you give me? Can we do it together, kind of a thing, kind of a doorway, an entry into what sometimes, like John said, is really a difficult decision. And if you do need to have a financial advisor participate in the discussion, then make sure that person is a fiduciary. And looks like they're saying, what if this is someone who is a friend or someone in the neighborhood? Sounds like maybe some of those organizations, John, that you've been talking about might be able to help. What do you think?
I think so as well. That's a tough question to answer, as far as, because when it comes to the the specific relationships amongst family and setting something up. But again, I think stressing having that set up in advance.
Mhm.
If somebody is already in a state of being or in an incapacitated state, going and seeking that now, it might be quite a bit more difficult. So I think, especially with regards to finances, yes, in connection to a series of resources that I provided for this, and a couple more that I'm going to be sending as well. There are a number of places there that could definitely help with this question with regards to specifically getting that sort of power of attorney if it's needed, depending upon the circumstance, if it's possible. But yes, I think I would check out the resources that I sent to LDAT as well, and hopefully that can be something that can link you to a place that can provide answers with regards to that specific situation. Great, yeah, that's it. It's in the
Yeah, so there was a resource posted in the chat, and we'll also make sure that folks who are not watching this or on Zoom get that same resource. So I have several questions that are coming in from the room, and I can see another in the chat. So I am going to ask you, let's see. Okay, first of all, this is a specific question around passwords. So how many letters or numbers or characters in a password is considered strong? What's best practice there?
Yeah, I've heard everything from 12 characters. I've heard 10. I've heard 18, which just sounds, well, a little extreme, to be honest with you. But the main key is, even if you just have 8 characters, keep in mind that the more, the better. The more difficult it is for fraudsters to break your password using their computer programs, which they have and will use. So again, no English language or foreign language words, because fraudsters will use a stuffing dictionary program and go through every word in the English language against passwords to try to break it. And then no names, no grandkids, no birthdays, any things that your grandkids might be sharing on social media. And then again, think of a phrase using the first letter of each word, or consider using a password manager that can take care of that for you. And, some password sites are already going to give you direction, click here to see what we ask for or require in some cases. And sometimes they have limits, sometimes they do not.
Great. So you might be pivoting also to this question in the chat, which I'll ask you as well, which is a little bit twofold. So Susan, I hope it's okay. I'm going to break this up a bit. Most password sites set requirements, as you just mentioned, Kay. So often the website will tell you how many characters, minimum or maximum you need to be within. Susan suggests that often the limit is 8. That might be the minimum. Have you seen, I guess, as the digital world evolves, have you seen this evolve as well, that maybe we were being asked for 5-letter passwords at one point, and now we're being asked for much longer and complicated passwords?
Well, and that is true. Password management is something that is always seems to be evolving. And it used to be, my dog's name is Buster was a great password. And then no, don't use that. And again, characters, symbols, capital, not capital letters. And now we have authentication with facial recognition in addition to passwords, thumbprints in addition to passwords. Several cyber experts say that passwords are never going to go away. Some say that passwords are going to be replaced by a new technique called a passkey that is now being rolled out in beta by several large corporations, by Google, being tested by Visa, different. And it's an entirely different process where passwords aren't used at all. That's a long time coming. So again, passwords are going to continue to evolve, and most likely, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point it's required to do that bio-identification. It won't be a choice as we have now.
So I think my takeaway for that is the landscape is evolving. It's probably true at some point that we had a maximum number of characters we could use on for our passwords, but that may be changing. If you only get 8 characters to use on a website for your password, I think it sounds like Kay's advice would be make them count. Don't make it Buster.
Right.
So, and then I'm going to also ask another question from the audience, and this might piggyback with something in the chat as well, which is the question from the audience is, are those banks who offer higher interest rates a hoax? And so if you see an ad, how can you parse out, is this a good institution? Is this a bad institution? And then in the chat, also it's mentioned that caution that when you do talk to a financial advisor at a bank or a financial institution, they may also have another interest in mind, and they may be trying to sell you something. So what are some tools and tips you have for people trying to navigate this?
Yep. And I thank you for pointing that. I saw that in the chat as well. And it's a very good point, because so I guess I want to kind of specify what I meant with that comment is that, so if say, for example, you already have a pre-existing account with a bank or a credit union, and it's with an institution that you have a history with, you have that trust that's hopefully been built. And you can go there and speak with somebody who's a financial advisor or financial counselor there. That's the best, that is a good route to go. But again, when you are, yes, when you're going to a place that maybe you don't have an account with them, or if you're seeking out other financial institutions, it is indeed their job to be essentially selling their products for you. And that is something that I'm not advocating to go for, but I'm saying, like I said, if you have that as pre-established relationship, or perhaps you have friends or family members that you can talk to that can direct you to places that you can seek out that help, that's a good place to go. If not, that's definitely the other option is checking out that National Foundation of Credit Counseling. And so seeking out the information that you can from that website with regards to finding nonprofit free services from these credit or financial counseling organizations. There's a number of them in Washington State. And so these folks are there, they're not trying to sell products. They're not a part of a bank or a credit union. And so these are individuals who can also help. As far as I think with regards to when you're looking at advertisements based upon, this specific savings account has a higher interest rate versus the other one. I think, as with any sort of advertisement, take things as a grain of salt. It certainly would be, it would help to look into it if it is something you're interested in doing, but make sure you're paying attention to the fine print, because sometimes those interest rates can change after a certain amount of time. I think it kind of goes along the same lines of when you're looking for credit card options and things like that. You do have to do your homework and kind of figure out, okay, well, how will this actually benefit me, and what's the long-term ramifications of what these sort of special products or accounts I might be opening will provide for me. But absolutely a fantastic question.
Mm-hmm. And, I might also add to really caution folks that if you see an advertisement, whether it's in print or you get an email, or you see something on social media, an advertisement that you're reading Yahoo News and here's an advertisement about a great deal. Really, really be cautious and do your research. If it's a pop-up advertisement, those are one of the top scam opportunities to have you click and follow a lead with the hope of getting a great return. So again, you really have to do your research. Don't accept that what you see is real. As recently as last month, the FBI put out statements about pig busting. And what is that? Highly sophisticated trained scammers from Southeast Asia contacting millions of people across the US to invest and start saving in fantastic return accounts. And they even send them reports showing, here's how much I've earned. And if you invest, here's how much you can earn. And when you invest, then you get statements and reports showing how much your money is growing. Of course, you're the pig. They're fattening you up, so to speak. And now they're convincing you to move your money into cryptocurrency, which is the big thing. And you can't say, I don't know anything about cryptocurrency. How could I be scammed? That's not possible. Believe me, they're expert at helping you move your money. And then, of course, they take your money and they're gone. So again, like John says, be super skeptical, really do your research, stop clicking. That might be the story of the day. Don't click.
So we have maybe about 10 minutes, I think. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions that I see in the chat, and I do have one more in my hand, and then I'll give our panelists a moment to wrap up as well. One thing that you made me think of as you were talking, John, about reading the fine print around selecting a bank and which financial product to use is thinking about the fees for keeping those accounts open. So that might be one place to start. If an interest rate sounds great, that's one thing. But if you have to pay to put your money there, then make sure you're weighing that cost. So, and Mignon in the chat says, I was once told that if something sounds too good to be true, it is, and it's a scam. I think that's probably sage advice for most of this.
Good rule of thumb.
Yeah. So Susan has asked a question about online access and password vulnerability, kind of the vulnerability that exists online. And specifically, she says, if you don't have an online account and you don't share information online, how can someone go online and set up an account in your name?
Mm-hmm. Well, if your personal information is stolen, if your ID and password are stolen, sold on the dark web, whoever has that information, and they know your email, which is usually your ID, they can go online and go to key.com, bankofamerica.com, and click on the button, I want to set up an account, and then they just answer the questions, create a password using your email, and now they're in. You know, if your bank hopefully will ask for two-factor authentication, but again, the scammers are much more sophisticated and have more information than we think that they do. It's very likely they have the information to set that up, on your behalf as them with your info.
And I think Susan or Kay, am I correct in sort of saying that even if you're not actively participating in online activity, your information still exists even in hard copy somewhere. Maybe it's the bank records, maybe it's the records from the purchase you made at Target. Mm-hmm. And those organizations are also susceptible.
There's no question about it. If you go to Walgreens, for example, and write a check and give it to the clerk, then essentially you're giving them your name, your address, the routing number, your bank account number, and then that check is going somewhere to be electronically deposited. And then what's going to happen to your check? Who has it? What do they do with it? Are you comfortable with what they do with it? So there's a lot of questions. You don't want to see bad guys around every corner, but it's a good idea to have a dose of skepticism when you're looking around those corners.
Mhm. And Susan points out that maybe in her case, there won't be any money in that bank account. But I think, more broadly speaking, your information could be used to set up a credit card. And so you don't have to have money in a debit account, or a checking account somewhere, a savings account somewhere. Someone could rack up debt in your name. So I think we're all, no matter how old we are, we're all vulnerable to these scams. And so glad you're helping us come up with some ways to recognize them, address them, kind of get the shame away, and move forward. So I'm going to read one more question, and then we're going to wrap up shortly. So this person is saying, I need a part-time job, but I'm disabled, 63 years old. Could I get training to be able to get a job with my limitations? So I'm just going to go ahead and say, absolutely, you can have a job with disabilities. People with disabilities hold all kinds of paid and unpaid positions and contribute in all kinds of ways to the workforce. And you are in fact legally required for your workplace to make accommodations for your disability. So please don't let that be a limitation. And if you need help navigating that, I want to direct you to a resource called Community Living Connections that can also help navigate some resources that are available to those with disabilities. Without going too far down that track, I think it's safe to say that we can provide some resources, and I would say that AARP actually has a great working in I think it's called the AARP Work Channel. So maybe someone can pop that link in the chat, or we can get that information to this participant, all about working maybe in your 50s, 60s, 70s, beyond. We know that people are working later and later, which is great if they would like to, because there's a lot of valuable knowledge and experience that evaporates once people retire. So thanks for continuing to bring that to the workplace. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just take a moment, and is there anything else that you want to leave us with? Kind of what's one takeaway that you would like older adults and their families to hear today?
Go ahead, Kay.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that one of our participants actually alluded to this. And I would say, if you think your loved one is being defrauded by a family member or a caregiver, or that they're being scammed by a third party, or if you think you're being scammed, you're not sure, I would ask you to listen to that voice in the back of your head as you're examining the situation. If something seems strange, if you're being pressured to make a decision right now, or as our one of our audience members said, if something sounds just plain too good to be true, it likely is. So don't make a decision on the spot. Give information or click on a link online. And don't panic. That's the goal of the scammers. Talk to a trusted loved one in any of those scenarios. It's true for fraud. It's true for cybercrime. It's true if an elder is suspected of being taken advantage of. I highly recommend contacting the AARP helpline, and that is aarp.org/fraud-watch network. You can call them at 877-908-3360 and talk to a person who is trained to help you. Listen to your story in any of these arenas that we've talked about today, and help you determine, is this a scam or am I being silly? If this is a scam, what should I do? And maybe just as important, how can I report it? So that's my takeaway. Listen to that voice in your head, and if you think you're being scammed, reach out and talk about it. Don't be embarrassed.
Thank you, Kay. And On the topic of reporting too, I'll just quickly share that the King County Prosecutor's Office has a whole team. That's okay. So John, I'm going to hand it to you to close us out. And I realize we're ending just a few moments earlier today. We've got a space conflict, and so we're trying to accommodate multiple programs happening. So John, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that question with regards to the gentleman who was asking about going back to work. I think that that's a fantastic point to make. And additionally, do check out the resources that I had sent in that link, because it links to both the Employment Security Department as well as WorkSource of Washington. These are two entities. One of the WorkSource of Washington is one that I partner with, where I provide a lot of the trainings. These are free to anyone, and you can go on there with resumes, finding jobs, other various trainings on there. There's lots of free information out there, and by all means seek that out. I would say one big thing that I really want to kind of hit home with everyone who might be listening is well to pass on the information that you have learned. When it comes to finances, I can't stress enough how important it is to share the stories that we've experienced, those good stories and bad stories. And I think that when we share them with loved ones, it's something that is passed on. We're passing generational knowledge upon generational knowledge on down the road. And I think that when you share these experiences, you'll actually be, again, quite surprised with how much of an effect it can have upon your loved ones.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. And, we're all in this together, of all ages. The landscape is evolving every day. Scammers are getting more sophisticated. So it really benefits all of us to have these conversations together, to raise our collective awareness, to support each other and sussing out, is this okay? Is this not okay? And to helping seek justice when we might be impacted by fraud or a scam. So I really want to thank Kay and John for being here today. It's been a great discussion with both of you. Thank you for the work you do, not just today, but always in our communities with everyone, all ages. And thank you again to the Lake City Community Center. It's been really fun to be here. Thank you to the interpreters, who I'm sure have been working hard, and to all of you online and in the room for joining us. Really glad to have had this conversation with you all today. So thank you again, and we will be sending out those resources to folks, so you don't have to feel like you need to write down a long URL.
Thank you.
Until next time,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.